Welcome back, everybody. You got Will and I-Man here from the Block Runner, and today we're going to be talking about Uniswap V4.
Yeah, this is going to be a deep one.
Yeah, so
set your timers. This might be a 30-minute or something because we're going through a journey, I guess, through some old lands, some old battered lands that we used to call home long ago.
Long time ago. Almost a past life, it seems.
It feels like, for sure. But if you were around during those days, you really appreciate like what the vibes of those times, right? So what is this long lost land we speak of?
Ethereum. Congrats,
Ethereum,
TJ.
dude.
We're back, baby.
We're finally back, dude. Full circle back to ETH. But why are we back, right? Well,
yeah,
it's not just us. It's like a lot of very talented developers have been tinkering in these old homelands. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, so if you've been paying attention to what's going on, especially on Robinhood, every single thing happening is in contact with Uniswap V4.
A lot of things for sure, yeah.
Yeah, so what's
kind of like what we've suddenly realized, like, you know, a lot of the projects we've been focusing over the last month or two, there's like a Uniswap V4 angle to them.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
What is happening there? Why is that such a nexus point of innovation? So we did our investigations, right?
Yeah, so this tweet came out a while back, January 2025, and this is Uniswap actually announcing Uniswap V4. It says users can LP on V4 through the Uniswap web app, and swapping is rolling out over the coming days. This is live on Ethereum, Polygon, Arbitrum, OP, Mainnet, Base, Binance, Blast.
Fucking everywhere, dude.
Everybody.
We get it, Uniswap. You're cool. You got friends.
Yeah, you got friends, right? V4 turns Uniswap protocol into a developer platform. This is made possible with the introduction of hooks, contracts that allow anyone to customize how pools, swaps, fees, and LPs positions interact. And then hooks mean unlimited new features that drive deeper liquidity and more swaps. So I remember when this tweet came out, and I thought Uniswap V4 was kind of a big deal, but since we were doing other stuff.
Well, everybody was paying attention to Solana. That's really the truth
of
why this feels like it's been an underutilized, underappreciated, I guess, contribution to the space. Because, remind the audience what was happening around this time. We were literally just recovering from like an AI meta on Solana.
Yeah.
Mostly on Solana, right? Like AI 16Z, and then Virtuals did its thing, which was a base thing, but
That's true.
That was January 2025 was like when everything was starting to kind of like.
Dude, Trump launched the meme coin.
Oh yeah, that too. Yeah, we were also recovering from that.
MANIA,
Libra. Yeah,
Libra.
All that stuff. So we were like hungover, right? So it's like Uniswap, go away, dude.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear about your innovations.
Yeah, right.
I'm recovering addict from the trenches, dude. I'm trying to unsquiggle my brain a little bit.
Yeah.
But, now that people are kind of like sobering up from that period, they're starting to realize how useful this can become, right?
Yeah, so give me a second. I think I got the wrong.
Uh-oh. So
here we go.
User error?
Here we go.
Okay. So we're looking at docs.
Yeah, we're looking at docs. So if you don't read docs, you're missing out.
Sure are.
If you're a developer, you're reading docs pretty frequently, and these days you just basically copy this link, share it with your AI.
Yeah.
And just, AI, tell me what I can do here.
Pretty much.
Yeah, and so I recommend you guys do that, especially if you're a developer, you're a creator. And so this is the origin story. This is what can happen with hooks. And so Uniswap V4, there's this Bankless article here. It says, hooks are the new terrain for on-chain collectibles.
Yeah, so this is another thing that kind of skirted under our radar from its initial phase of deployment, right? This, I think, was several months ago. The Unipags, look at them. They're unicorns, dude.
Glorious.
They're beautiful. Look at these magnificent creatures, majestic as they be. There's some novelty surrounding them, right? Because we're no strangers to NFTs, especially pixel NFTs. We've seen a million renditions of this.
That's right.
On Ethereum and on Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So, we're back on Ethereum. What makes these things interesting, right?
Yeah, so we're not talking about minting NFTs. In practice, the flow is this. You interact with the V4 collectibles pool. A hook catches your swap of the ERC20 token, computes traits from the transaction context, and passes those traits to an on-chain SVG render. The renderer then assembles a unique visual artifact entirely from contract code and with no off-chain dependencies. And your artifact emerges from the pool bound to your balance and trading activity.
It's interesting. Shares a lot of like philosophical alignments to like ordinals and DMT and such.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, much more on-chain than off, much more like rooted in its generative properties to like components of data or the transaction itself, whatever, right?
Yeah.
You got to experience all that during the ordinals, Renaissance.
Right.
This is not so strange to you, right? It might be to others who did not experience that.
Yeah. Yeah, so these are not NFTs.
They're not. They're like, it's a thing that you can have basically possession and ownership of if you buy enough of the actual underlying token, which is essentially is like you just need one whole token. Right.
Yeah. There's 5,000 supply, right?
Either 5 or 10. I want to say 10,000.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's like you have one of the Upeg tokens, and then within the token itself, within the V4 hook itself, it kind of like renders the visual, collectible associated to that, right? So it's interesting. It's a new dynamic. You don't have like two individual assets anymore. It's just one that can be, I guess, wrapped into an eventual NFT asset, therefore become tradable down the line.
All right, let's read this. It says, spent the last stretch inside Unipag V4 Teams testnet deploys. Their next product is already fully built there. It's a launchpad for asset-backed tokens. Every token you launch actually holds real content on chain built on the same engine Unipag itself runs on. It runs off a single factory. One call deploys a token. It's Uniswap V4 hook and a live market. So what can actually back a token? Your 4 providers types are live, and they come down to 2 families. A generative one. Each unit of the token is one-of-a-kind piece pulled from a seed and drawn inside the contract. The unicorn engine generalized. It says file backed, a real file stored fully on chain in chunks. A whole image or an HTML file lives inside the token itself. Very similar to ordinals.
Yeah, these are like scripts, right?
Yeah.
And like components to a script that can be called, based on, in DMT's case, some pattern that occurs on Bitcoin, like triggers like some rendering component. So again, very similar, right?
Yeah, so there's a bonding curve component. The token trades on a curve and graduates into a permanent Uniswap V4 pool once it hits its ETH target, and then skip the curve, list straight into V4 with your own liquidity. So the fees straight from the on-chain config, 1% tax on every swap, plus a standard 1% V4 LP fee, so 2% trade, a one-time 1% when a token graduates. That revenue splits 50-50, half the protocol and half to the token's creator.
All right, so your typical launchpad setup, right? Yeah, you want creators involved, especially because there's like actual NFT art creation required for these things to, I guess, have some sort of value pegged to them. You're gonna need some good creators, I would imagine.
Yeah.
So the fee dynamics should align to that, which they do, and then of course you got your anti-sniping mechanics as well.
That's right. It says any file or an entire collection stored fully on chain behind your token. So in the previous article by Bankless, they mentioned some of these projects that did something similar. Ethscriptions was one of them. We interviewed one of the creators there, and they're using call data in order to have tokens, and I think they even had NFTs as part of the call data itself. But the thing is that it was all on chain. They weren't leveraging like any of the off-chain storages that we're kind of accustomed to with NFTs. Yeah,
so this, I mean, whether you identify with like NFTs or just art, collectibles, whatever, as being some sort of value add or not, it's kind of like the underlying tech, I guess, of what makes this possible is those V4 hooks.
Yeah.
That is kind of like the mechanism here that's being highlighted more so than the NFTs themselves. And Unipag being considered as like the first real utilizers of that, demonstrators of why V4 is like, useful. That I would pair to like the actual esteem and the potential future value of this thing, right? Like the Unipag project itself. Plus, I guess there's enough evidence here seeping through the cracks that a launchpad is coming to really like, exemplify the overall value to this.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see if it like festers beyond just like a proof of concept, right?
Yeah, so let's take a look at Unipag here. It says a new kind of on-chain object, not an NFT, not a token in the conventional sense, built on Uniswap V4 hooks. The name will make sense by the end. And here's the contract. All the links will be in the description. It says, when V4 shipped, the interesting question wasn't what it did to existing tokens. It's what it can do. That's never been tried before. Hooks let logic live at the point of exchange, not wrapped around, not bolted on top. That's a small technical change with a large design behind it. It says UPEG is a custom data structure inside a V4 compatible smart contract. Properties, appearance, characteristics, state stored, and computed entirely on chain, not a claim on something else. So
the object itself is the thing.
Yeah, so this is the thing.
Okay. What a thing to say.
Yeah, this is, so we got the traits over here, the hash that represents the output, and we got the actual art here. It says the hook is a Unipag hook. That's the name of the smart contract. It does three things. It starts the token when the first OP position is added. It re-randomizes an on-chain seed on every swap, and then exposes that seed via a random seed provider so that the SVG renderer can read it.
Okay, yeah, this keeps on going and going and going and going. So,
yeah,
I think we get it. I think, I guess the novelty of the name itself, Unipeg, has something to do with like the origins of Uniswap itself. I think that was supposed to be the original like actual name of Uniswap, but Vitalik had some sort of input, decided Uniswap is a better name. That's what it became. But Unipeg has now been resurrected. So there's some lore, there's some history behind the name itself, right?
All right, so what are we talking about here? What's the market cap? Sitting at 6.2 million, and its all-time high was a little while back, 30 million, and its all-time low was 1.5 million. So quite the opportunity if this catches on again.
Yeah, I mean, so you're kind of wondering if that platform is going to get delivered. I think that it would be a catalyst here in this sense, because obviously that initial run-up was, the market's reaction to, again, the introduction of something novel, which we understand is what the market likes, wants to find. I mean, that's what we want to look for and find. Like anybody who's building something new, please show it to us, right? Because that typically is what leads to the next phase of some sort of market growth, right?
Yeah, so that means that if this catches on, other developers start deploying, similar type assets. This is the original, and therefore could do something.
It's the NAT thesis all over again, right?
Yeah.
NAT is essentially that in context of DMT, so that's what this would become. In context of, what's the name of this?
Unipag?
Is that a protocol name to this? I guess not, right?
I don't think so. I think it's called Unipag.
Let's call it Unipag then. Unipag protocol, dude. Whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
All right, so moving on to FWA. So we talked about this a few weeks ago.
Yeah, and we haven't really done an update since, so I mean, a lot has happened. We basically saw this experimentation from the ground up, right? We thought it was a good idea. It captured the gacha wave in as much of a native Web3 way you could by basically decentralizing the mechanism of gacha itself and converting it to like a permissionless, liquidity backing situation, right? So people can now activate their dormant, illiquid assets. They're just sitting in their wallets, basically. Activate them by just adding some sort of capital backing to them, and now they're part of this flywheel. Right?
Activating is a very nice term. It's more like risking it. You put it in You're putting it in the vault. You're backing it with like its equivalent value, sometimes way more than it's actually valued.
For a good reason.
Because the more you back it, the more rare it is to pull.
Yeah.
And you stay in the pool longer.
Therefore, you earn more.
And then you earn more.
Because every pool is splitting.
Every pool splits the exact same amount.
Yeah, so if like a pool costs $1,000, then there's 1,000 people in there backing these assets.
Everyone gets $1.
Everyone gets $1. So yeah, you don't want to be the guy who only put in like a $10 asset.
Yeah, because you'll get pulled
immediately, and
you lost $9, right? You get $1, you lost $9.
Exactly. So that should sum it up. And if it still doesn't make sense, we've got like 3 or 4 videos you could look at talking about FWA. But they're still around, still kicking, still innovating.
Yeah, so one of the new innovations is FW Air launches, a novel way to distribute NFTs.
Where? It's not FW Air, dude. It's where launches, right? instead of fair.
Right.
Yeah, I see what you did there.
So what they so what they did with this is you're launching NFTs, and
yeah, we still need to do that, right?
yeah, you still need to do that.
Can't just figure out a new way for like old NFTs to all of a sudden become interesting again or valuable or yield producing. It's like we still need to make new stuff. So how do you do that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So in this case is like I'm a creator. I have 10,000 NFTs. They go into this FWA pool. And then people who want to mint that, they go say, I like this one. I want to mint it. I'm going to supply liquidity for that one at whatever price that I think it's worth. Let's say $100 worth of ETH. Put it in. And if someone uses the gacha mechanic to try to get one of these random good ones, I'll get fees. But if mine, the one that I supply liquidity gets pulled, that person has to decide, do I take the NFT or do I take the cash? If they take the cash, I keep the NFT.
Yeah.
If they take the NFT, I get my 99% of the value back. And so I can go and attempt to supply liquidity on a different one.
Yeah. So in other words, if you now want, like if this takes off, this is the new experience. So I guess acquiring like new NFTs from, I don't know, notable creators. Like you got to gamble your way through the gauntlet to receive
pretty much
basically what you want instead of directly just buying one for one.
Yeah. It's kind of the same as minting because you're going to get a random one anyways.
It is. And then, you just got to go through the gacha process, right? Like, you you pull, you might not get what you want because this is mixed in with like everything else.
Yeah.
You might get like some crypto toad or something. It's like, I don't like those. I wanted the new thing.
Sure.
So you just send it back and you get some liquidity back to keep trying until eventually you get what you want.
Yeah. And then you might get lucky.
Good for the creator.
Right.
Because they're getting a part of the money here.
They get part of the money. Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you might get lucky. You might get like a really, what the social kind of consensus deems a rare one because it supplied the most liquidity. So you could decide to take the rare NFT or the liquidity that's backing the rare NFT, which tends to be more money on average.
Yeah. But who would do that, right? You want to speculate here on the art itself.
Okay, so then what's the price on FWA? Well, it did its own 80% correction. And then it went back to all-time highs, but now it's 50% down at 23 million.
Yeah, it's doing its volatile thing, right? This is crypto, in case you were, not new to this. It's pretty common volatility. So you can either stomach it or you cannot, right? So it is what it is.
All right. New project here. It says Prism is a Uniswap V4 hook that shares 100% of its own protocol LP fees with its holders.
Yeah, when I first saw that statement, that's where I got, tantalized a bit.
Same.
Yeah. I was
you shared that with me. I was like, we got to use this.
Yeah. We got to understand it first before we decide to use it in any shape or form, right? But it's like, well, how is this possible?
Yeah.
Let's figure it out, right?
Yeah, so the token is the position. No wrapper, no staking, ETH side fees, 100% to holders. Prism side is 80% to holders and 20% burned. It says every app feeds the same Prism. Every basket route 25% of its fees into buying and burning Prism, more apps, more fuel. And then the supply only shrinks. Hard capped at 5,000, no mint function, every burn is forever.
Yeah, so it has good, I guess, degenomics, right? It's got a supply deflationary component to it. But like the obvious most attractive point here is like you're now a recipient of like the LP fee, right? As just simply being a token holder, which previously was an exclusive benefit to LP providers, right?
That's right.
So it was like a separate class of actor. So I was like, damn, pretty cool, right? Uniswap V4 is useful.
It is useful, yeah. Prism app store. So I guess a lot of these apps that they created, but some of these probably not. And so I guess interacting with these applications, that 25% drip goes to buy back the Prism token.
Yeah, so it's a bit like, stockbrokers, other projects we've seen recently. It's like you got your core base asset, build a community around that, and then, a developer platform in itself, because everything, again, is like connected to V4 hooks. So now you can build a lot of different things that in itself is valuable, generates revenue, and then you direct all of that back to that core asset. Just like stockbrokers, they got their launchpad coming, their decks, and who knows what else, right?
Yeah.
Just keep expanding, basically.
Yeah, I really like the design of the website. It's pretty interesting.
I agree. I mean, it's the hardest thing these days. Everybody's like over reliance on AI.
Yeah.
It's like
all of them look the same, even though they look different.
Yeah, but you can like obviously tell, right? I mean, obviously these guys had to have used AI also, because who wouldn't in this day and age?
Yeah.
It's just like such a time saver. But they still injected enough taste.
They did.
To it.
They did.
Yeah.
And one of their other products is called Spectrum. It says hold your asset and then make it your basket token. So it's like a ETF of a bunch of tokens that you collect into a basket. You launch a token against that basket, and then I believe you manage that basket based on like your sentiment, right?
Yeah, your own percentages, right? It's like I'm going to create a Robinhood basket because I'm the expert Robinhood degen, or I just know what's going on and popping off in all the Discord channels.
Yeah.
Telegram groups, whatever. So I'm going to create a basket of all the top projects I think will do 100x this cycle. That's what you market your basket as. There's got like 6 different projects in it. You get to adjust, which project's the best. So the best one gets 50%.
Yeah.
Second best one gets 30%. And then you could scale from there.
Correct.
And then boom, what people do who buy this coin, essentially that coin, because it's using Prism's underlying tech, it's the ETH is being directed to purchase each of those individual assets according to that weight.
Yeah.
Just, dispersion, right?
So here we have an example. Uni 54%, WBTC 17%. We got Aave 16 and then 12% for Curve. And volume on the token goes to buy these underlying assets.
Yeah, which grows this thing, right? This basket. So it's getting, a diversified exposure to a lot of things through a single token, which reduces the complexity for a lot of specific crypto users. People don't want to go out there and find each individual like project that has promise, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because if you pick these baskets well, and if you're an influencer, you create this basket, and it does well, your token does well, and then the underlying assets do well, and then the token itself is a claim to the pro rata percentage ownership of that token of the underlying assets. So if you own 1% of this token, you have a claim of 1% of what's in the basket. So in this case, it's 2351, and you claim 1% of that.
Yeah.
And then again, if the token is doing well, it's churning more volume, it is growing the basket.
Correct. Yeah. So whatever ownership you have in that, the value goes up with it, right? Because you have that claim at the end of the day.
That's right.
So it's cool. Yeah. It's an interesting concept. I think, obviously indexes are a big deal in the traditional, finance world.
Yeah.
Because it provides that like more stability, more convenience. It's a better like consumer product.
Yeah.
Like from like an investment standpoint.
Oh, absolutely. You don't have to like manage your own portfolio.
Right. So it's just ape into an index and like, forget about it.
Yeah.
So this is a crypto version of that, right?
Yeah. All right. So Vitalik has something to say. He says building index tracking assets on top of options instead of debt. And so he's got his own research paper here, as he normally does. It says, what if the use options as the base of DeFi instead of collateralized debt positions and liquidations? So instead of extreme price movements creating a sharp and global you get liquidated effect, instead your exposure to the index diverges quadratically from your preferred exposure in a smoother way. And so he says that this is very volatile, and I would rather hold an algorithmic stablecoin, which is, the exact opposite of stable, because we've seen a lot of these crash. But he says that there's something here.
Well, specifically, I guess, the act of creating baskets for things, introducing, a product that's less volatile, so therefore it strengthens the stability of certain things like stable coins that are derived off of that, right?
Yeah.
And other necessary, I guess, primitives. Like so the introduction of indexing, creating a basket of tokens, assets, whatever, that have like a single correlated value to that. It can be utilized in several different ways. And the reason why I brought up this article is because it reminds me of the days when Vitalik was all the time like promoting the idea of prediction markets.
That's right.
Like he would be writing articles left and right, like prediction markets. And it took a while for his like thesis to play out and for the world to realize, the value add of that.
Sure.
And of course the right developers to build the right product for it to go to market. But,
yeah. Thank you, Kalshi
and Polymarket. So they're there. These are multi-billion-dollar apps. So yeah, maybe it will happen again with like something like Spectrum or whoever else is kind of like working in this arena, right?
Yeah, I found it interesting. He says, I would feel much safer holding algo stables instead of something like this than in something that depends on an oracle that has to give in real-time answers. So that's like part of the issue with Polymarket and Kalshi is that you're depending on oracles.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so let's take a look at Prism. It did its run all the way to 7 million, and now it's sitting at 1.8 million.
Yeah, so definitely a nasty correction. But again, if you can't stomach volatility, you don't belong in crypto. It's that simple.
Yep. All right, so
last one,
weird one. It says IdentityMD is building a curated Uniswap V4 hook factory. It says 2,000 IdentityMD and NFTs act as a worker seats to build custom V4 hooks for projects. It says every project pairs project with IMDb, creating direct demand for IMDb. IMD.
Yeah, it sounds like another virtuals type setup.
Right.
Yeah.
And it says GitHub proposal, AI generated repo goes to NFT holders, build the hook, it gets reviewed, and then a multi-sig deployment. So basically, if you have one of these NFTs, it is your tool to actually build the hooks that projects need.
Right.
So you spend your own AI compute.
Yeah.
And everyone benefits because you had to purchase IMD tokens.
Interesting.
So it's not permissionless. Every launch goes through human review and then still early testnet with worker incentives not finalized yet.
Yeah. So this is obviously if you're not in crypto, this is like madness.
It is
madness in text form.
Yeah.
It's like, what are these people doing, dude, with their lives? Well, yeah. But if you're a crypto like us, like, this kind of makes sense. You would expect this.
Yeah.
Right. It's like the perfect amalgamation of like all these things. There's like, there's some DAO components to it because if there's a human review dependency, right? Like, okay, that means there's got to be some sort of like governance model.
Yeah.
Because there's going to be multiple humans because this is like a community of humans. It's not like one person, right? So there's DAOs. And then there's AI involvement in the actual execution of like the code to like build functional V4 hooks. And then there's NFTs involved.
Yep.
It's like, what is going on here, dude?
Yeah, so we're talking about it because right now it's at all-time high.
Yeah, and it's
half an ETH for one of these things.
Yeah, and again, it's kind of like a mini NFT season. So this is like an NFT that has some semblance of traction.
Yeah.
So it's worth paying attention to. And again, it's part of the whole V4 experimentation going on.
Yep. Market cap right now, 4 million, and it started at
2 days old?
2 days old, yeah.
Oh, wow. I didn't even realize it was that new. Well, there you go.
All on Ethereum, dude.
That is the big takeaway from this video, guys.
Yeah.
I don't think we've made a video like this in years where like everything is about Ethereum.
Yeah.
It's always been something else. Base.
That's right.
Solana, Robinhood.
Yeah.
Bitcoin even. But never Ethereum.
Yeah.
It's been like 2022 since that's happened.
I was going to say 2022 as well, yeah.
Man. So I don't know. I don't know what this ultimately means. I mean, I like to see it. There's like the innovator spirit that brought us into crypto.
I think that's why we like bear markets, because we get to see like cool stuff, start to develop.
Exactly. Yeah. Right now, these are like peanut market caps, right? 4 million here, 2 million there.
Yeah.
It all looks like bullshit right now. Like, and it always does, right? Historically, like we're looking at Axie Infinity.
Yeah.
Like, these idiots here playing with these little puffball creatures and having like tournaments. There's like 10 of them.
Yeah.
They think they're like doing something. And then like a year later, it's like $100 billion thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So you never know. You want to keep your eye on these things in case the next Axie, like we're looking at it right now.
That's right. So speaking of keeping an eye on things, let us know if you guys find something in Robinhood or Ethereum that you think we should look at. Put it in the comment section below. I appreciate you for watching, and we will catch you in the next video.
Peace.